Just 2005, shortly after the war in Iraq had started. Ended up under machine gun fire with me and the rest of my boys. Terrorists were using civilians as a shield. And I bombed the tower under direct orders not to, just to try to save me and my men's lives. Didn't matter. You disobey a direct order, you get punished for it, and I ended up in the brig. About 2006, people in fancy suits show up, asking if I'd like to get my freedom back, and I foolishly accepted. I went with what they call D-class personnel: rapists, murderers, extortionists, people that were never going to see the light of day again, and humanity simply just forgets about them. You know, kind of like how a war starts, and for the first 6 months, everybody's paying attention, and then after that, everyone's just like, man, a war's going on. And I end up going into an Ikea with these two D-class personnel. And I had red flags instantly when I knew that these guys were murderers and rapists. I kind of figured that they were sending us in there to die. They didn't give us any information besides that they wanted us to bring the people that were inside outside. And as we went in a straight line in the Ikea for about 35 minutes before we decided that we were going to turn back around and head back to where the exit was. And that's when we realized that 10 minutes into turning around, everything changed. We could not find the exit. Where we thought the exit was, it was gone, and we ended up in home house supplies. And about 3 hours after that, the lights went out, and these staff workers came. And they were grotesquely large. They were about 9 feet tall, when their hands were very large, very, very big, and long arms. Just everything about these workers was off. And they were asking us to leave the building, that the lights were off now and it was time for us to leave the building. And that was when one of the first D-class personnel obviously had been locked up too long, and I think was just looking for the first innocent thing or person that he could to take his anger out on, decided that he was going to confront one of these workers and try to attack the worker. And as soon as he got within arm range, the worker just proceeded to reach out, strangle him, break his neck, and literally rip his arms off. And that made not only that worker, but the other 3 workers that were with it enraged, and they let out like a howl, and they came after us. And I very quickly kicked one of the legs off of one of the bedposts and proceeded to bash one of them in the head, and it did not bleed. It just made a dent, and it fell over lifeless, and it stopped moving. The other D-class worker saw what I did, grabbed a broom, and proceeded to hit one of them, breaking it, and then as the worker fell onto him, tripping over his enlarged feet, it impaled itself, and it just stopped moving. But there was no blood, which was the craziest, strangest thing. More workers showed up, and the D-class personnel and I ran. And we just decided that we were going to run into the darkness, even though we couldn't see. We ended up scrambling up on top of these shelves, where him and I just went into the fetal position, and we waited. I'd say we waited for about 12 hours. We didn't even whisper to one another. We just sat there and touched one another, pointing, trying to squint in the darkness, looking for more of these workers. And when the lights came on, the workers just went right back to being docile and normal and stocking the shelves. And we were hungry, and we ended up following our nose to where there was these Swedish meatballs and some drinking fountains, and we ate them. And the workers, as soon as we were done, immediately went back to stocking the meatballs. And we decided that we were going to get up and have another look around on top of the shelves, and that's when we noticed that in the distance there was almost what looked like a colony. All these tables and chairs and beds and bed frames that had been put together in all these houses. And we worked our way over there, and we noticed that they were cleaning up the bodies of these workers and that they were hauling them away. And I asked why they were doing that. They weren't even surprised to see us. It's like they just naturally saw people show up in this weird Ikea all the time. And they said that if any of the bodies are left around, especially a dead one, that it attracts more of them, that they have no real idea of where they come from. But every night they have to, they set up defenses, and they have all these homemade weapons, and they fight them off. And I'll never forget this one kid. He had 3 broom handles that were duct taped together with this big saw on the end of it. And he would just go through and he would just saw them. And their skin was weird. It was almost like it was like styrofoam and rubber. They definitely were not human by any sort of the means. And they just went around, they restocked shelves, they restocked the Swedish meatballs, and the people lived in there. And come to find out that a lot of the people were really comfortable. And I started wondering about the lights and looking up, just kind of like as you're on the earth and you look up at the stars and you wonder how far away they are, if you can jump up and touch them. I was thinking the same thing about these lights, wondering how far up do they actually go. And I decided that I was going to get all these people at a similar thinking of mine, and we were going to make this tower. And we make this tower, and there was these people that we called the Ikeers, and they wanted to stay. They wanted to like colonize this interdimensional space, this pocket reality, and they did not want anyone to leave. So not only were we fighting the staff members at nighttime, we had to fend off attackers from the Ikeers who were trying to sabotage the entire situation, even though there were thousands and thousands of people who wanted to leave. And it only took a few days before we had like a 250-foot tower constructed, and we started realizing that the closer we got to those lights up there, the farther away they went. It's nothing that could be explained. And that's when we started seeing the drones. So somebody was flying drones in and was trying to maybe map out the vicinity. And shortly after we saw the drones, people started finding drones and bringing them to us. And I'd say it took about 4 months before I kind of officially became the leader of what we called house supplies. And all these different villages, and nobody knew how long this actually went. It looked like up there it went on forever, and that there were 15 to 16 different villages, but they were all split up in trade routes, and sometimes wars would happen, just like it would in real life. Well, I started seeing green and red flashes of light that would pop up for a minute, and I made a journal of this, and it took me about 2 weeks to make the journal before I got the timings down and the locations. And we ended up getting an expedition team together, and we took our Swedish meatballs and jugs of water, and we ended up going to where the flashing light was, and we found out it was an exit sign. And we ended up sending that D-class personnel that was with me out first. And we found out that we could get 15 people out at a time, because if you, and you don't want to know how we knew this happened, but if you decided that you were going to go out the door as it disappeared, things just kind of got chopped off. Luckily, it was only a finger, and the lady made it out. So that's what we did, and I took about 15,000 people out of that Ikea, and I ended up walking out myself, earning my freedom and some other benefits. And I even asked the people afterwards, I was like, can I tell anybody about this? And they said, sure, go ahead, but it's not like anybody's going to believe you anyways. So I imagine when you're dealing with the most powerful, wealthiest, secretive foundation in the world that protects you from anomalies, such as walking into a pocket dimension like an Ikea and going to an alternate universe, nobody's going to believe you anyways.